Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's Monday, February 24th, 2025. It's time for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. I ask clerk to certify the meeting notice.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Thank you. Clerk, call roll, please.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen. Here. Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Here. Thank you. You join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey.
Hey, I don't know how to drive that.
I might need to.
Okay. That looks like a complicated piece of machinery. You know? Yes. Okay, next item on the agenda is changes to the agenda. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move for an addition to the agenda, an action item, and this would be added in spot G7, the last of the Gs. And this action item would be to remand the draft and proposed ordinance 1051 to the planning and zoning.
I missed the number with the dash.
Yes, sir. To remand the draft and proposed ordinance 1051-24 to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And a motion of this type, Mr. Mayor, as you know, requires a reasoned statement made in good faith. And we've been advised by our city attorney that under Supreme Court precedent that was recently set, that this particular ordinance might need to be viewed with a different lens. And so that advice came within 24 hours of the noticing of this meeting, which constitutes the emergency, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That's a motion.
That is a motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
President of the council, to clarify, we're talking about 1051 or 1050-24.
I'm sorry, 1051. Okay.
It's not on here at all right now.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a new item, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. To add G7 as described. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. Item E is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move to approve the consent agenda as it's written.
I would second.
got a motion and a second. Approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, we'll move down to special business. Our good friend Amy is with us for a IIIA annual report. For those in the audience, IIIA is the entity that provides the health insurance for our city employees.
Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you this evening. Again, Amy Manning, Executive Director of IIIA, here to give you the annual report of the trust. So IIIA is a self-funded trust created in 2011 by a group of cities that got together and decided to go self-funded with their health benefits. If you'd like to go to the first page, you'd see some highlights down that side to give you an idea of how we ended the year. 114 agencies, just under 2,500 employees, 6,500 total members. Our annual budget right at the $38 million mark. And we have some new savings programs that led to a savings of $2.67 million on the year. The next two pages show our AAA agencies and the Board of Trustees. Am I echoing there? Sorry, it's not sensitive. Just as a special note, the Board of Trustees will be meeting this week in the Boise area on Thursday, so they'll be here locally for anyone who's interested in attending their meeting. On page 4, you might see the AAA team as we've continued to grow, and I would just add, we've continued to grow this year as well. We're up to 117 agencies right now. So you might notice a couple of new faces there on the AAA team to help us out. The pie chart in the middle of page 4 shows how every dollar was spent last year. So 89% of all funds, or 89 cents of every dollar, paid for claims. That 6% is administrative fees. We are self-funded, so we have to contract to use networks. Those are those network contracting fees for our Delta dental, for our dental, our vision, VSP. We rent Blue Cross of Idaho's PPO network for medical, also for our prescription plans. And then our contractor rates, operational expenses, and staff. You can see our admin and operating expenses have been decreasing each year, just a slight increase last year. So that's been trending very well. Under member relations, we do have a 24-hour helpline available. We always have a staff member assigned to answer that day or night, 365 days a year. We had 5,536 calls come in last year. So they're keeping us busy. That's good. We sponsor 11 different conferences throughout the year. On page 5, you see some finance information. Our prescription rebates, almost $2 million on the year. That's significant. As a reminder, that's a benefit of being self-funded. Those drug manufacturers pay a pharmacy rebate on every medication that's taken. Now, I would much rather the cost of drugs be lower. That seems to be the most reasonable plan, but that's unfortunately not how it works. So as a self-funded plan, we're able to negotiate those contracts to where those funds come back to the AAA instead of going for profit, maybe with an insurance company or something. So those are significant dollar amounts that come back to the trust. Our stop loss premiums, we are required to carry catastrophic insurance. Our premiums did go up a little bit. We'd had a higher year the year before. So those premium rates bumped a little bit last year. Our interest earned is listed, and then IBMP reserves, that is an amount that's determined by an actuary. It's reported to the Department of Insurance, and we're required to have that amount fully funded at all times. We do report that to DOI. On page 6 is information on the medical plan. You can see how many agencies we met with, how many rated, how many joined, how many were declined. And then that middle chart on the page 6, that's something that the trustees are always looking at. We know that medical claims tend to run in a 5-year cycle. 1 out of every 3 to 5 years will have a bad year. Each agency will. The AAA itself will have a higher claims year 1 out of every 3 to 5. So that's why we look at our 5-year performance versus trend. Trend is the term used for inflation. So those trend rates in that column, that is Idaho specific. The inflation rate for medical and drug claims in Idaho average between 6 and 7.5% every year. So a claim that we pay $100 for this year, we expect to pay $107 for that same claim next year. So if you look at the 5-year renewal of AAA versus the inflation rate, we did beat that inflation rate, 6.2 to the 6.5%. Our high claimants are listed on page 7. To be a high claimant, have to be over $100,000 claims within a plan year. We had 31 members hit that. Those that are in yellow, they did hit our catastrophic insurance, which means we did receive reimbursements on those. We paid all of those funds out, but reimbursements came back because we had an insurance in place. Those that are bold in red are no longer on our plan, and those in orange have a chronic condition, so they've been a high claimant before. Any questions on that? Okay. Page 8, this is the page where we're realizing some of those new programs that we implemented that are leading to a cost savings. So we have a maternity program, a medication infusion program, telehealth. I'm not sure if any of the employees, or if anyone's used our telehealth program, but I do think it's one of the best programs that we offer. So we do contract with 2 nurse practitioners. They're on page 9, Velma Siebold and Dustin Reno. We contract with them to run a 24-hour telehealth line for our members. Again, they will answer that day or night. 4,185 calls came into it last year. If those members had gone to an urgent care rather than calling telehealth, we would have paid an additional $305,000 above our contracted rate with those providers. So financially, we feel like it's a good move for us, but more importantly, we put that in place because we want our members to have access to medical care 24 hours a day for them to use. Now, we have a lot of areas that are very small and rural areas. They don't have urgent cares, so those would have been ER visits. So we feel like that's a conservative estimate of the savings on having the telehealth plan. And then we implemented a co-pay assistance program with our pharmacy. We're realizing just over $1 million in savings from using that. Our wellness screening information is on page 9. We do send those same two medical providers out on site to every agency where we conduct wellness screenings throughout the year. We find some really important information through those, some diagnoses that we help catch. So our members are thinking of their health and taking care of it. We started adding skin checks 2 years ago to that. That was due to our highest claimant a couple of years ago was a stage 4 melanoma patient. We just realized members weren't getting in and getting their skin checks like they should be. So our first year we caught 2 stage 1 melanomas. Last year, again, we caught another stage 2 melanomas during the skin checks, and an additional 15 skin cancers on top of that. So that's an important program. On page 10 and 11, show the dental and vision plans also. So you can skim those quickly and see how those plans are performing. And then on page 12, in 2020, we launched a mental health program. And that was due to us not being able to find some of the services in the state that we wanted to make certain that our members had. So we did launch our own EAP network. That's Employee Assistance Program. Those are free counseling sessions. We have training available. We have a first responder helpline just for AAA first responders and their families. That's a 24-hour helpline. You can see that on page 13. Those calls go into Dr. Stephen Odom, and his team is psychologists that we work with. He and his senior team members answer all those calls. 224 calls came in last year. 5 of those were first responder calls. I will mention mental health just passed medical as being the largest benefit that we administer right now. So we have some large agencies that are signing up for the mental health program. We had almost 2,800 free counseling sessions were used last year. We went on site and did 7 critical incident debriefs. So just as a reminder, if a critical incident occurs at the city, please give us a call. Let us know. We will send a team in to help with that. And then we had 30 members go into inpatient treatment for behavioral health. Out of those, 11 were employees, 3 were spouses, and 16 were children. So children to us is under the age of 26 and on their parents' health plan. Most of those tend to run ages 18 to 22 is the age range. This is a number that has held pretty steady for the last couple of years. We are seeing a lot of young people across the state struggling with mental health to a point where they need to be put into inpatient care. Out of those 16, only 1 was substance abuse. The other 15 were all suicidal ideation and issues where they just needed to have inpatient treatment where we could help them and their families. So it's important that we have these programs set and ready to help. We feel like it's making a difference. On the last page, looking forward, that's for this current year, we have budgeted a reduction in our third party and professional fees. We've negotiated some contracts that led to some savings. We did switch to Smith RX for our pharmacy. So any issues with that, with the employees, please let us know. We know that when you move a large group, there's always some pain points can happen and we want to make sure we can take care of those for you. We did launch our 15-minute Mindful Mondays. So as a reminder, the first Monday of every month, employees can sign in and do a quick 15-minute session with us for a mindful practice to get ready for their upcoming month. We have a CPAP and BiPAP program for sleep apnea. We've launched some new accounting software, new enrollment and billing software, and we've just completed our regional mental health wellness teams. So we have teams of clinicians, mental health clinicians assigned for each region of the state so that we can actually respond even more quickly than we had before. So we're excited about that. Any questions or comments or concerns for me?
Information, thank you.
Council? Yeah. No, I know our staff is happy with the coverages and the effort that your team makes to take care of us. And in this environment we're in today, no questions is a great sign.
Okay. Well, excellent.
Yeah, appreciate this report. And thanks so much for coming.
Okay, thank you. If anything does come up, Lisa knows how to get a hold of me. So
You're not hard to get a hold of. So that's great.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Amy. Item F2, council, I'd like to place the appointment of Andrea Cantor to the Garden City Urban Renewal Agency. I'd like to place that on your, I'd like to appoint her. I need your confirmation, if you'll allow that. Did we send out her resume?
We did.
Yeah, okay. I think she'll be a great member of the team. Councilmember Jacobs, who's on the Urban Renewal Board, I think can attest to that. She's been attending some meetings, I understand. And I got a recommendation from our Urban Renewal Chairman, Denny Houston, that he thinks she would be a value add.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of great experience in the economic development field. So anyway, my request is that you codify my appointment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would move that we authorize your appointment of Andrea Cantor to the Garden City Urban Renewal Agency for a 5-year term.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking to see if she's on the phone. She just added to her family a few days ago, so she may be occupied at the moment. Next item, the financial reports. These are on page 22. Do you have any comments on those, Lisa?
No
That you wanna
specific
make?
comments. The one I will somewhat address is the work comp. So workers' comp is based on a number of factors. One being the price per payroll by industry. So a police officer versus a sewer worker. And that's not necessarily what caused the increase. What has caused the increase in our rates more than any other year has been the usage. And we run on a rolling 3-year term. So they look at the claims over 3 years. So a high year will fall off eventually, but we did have some high claim years. Mostly it's a result of surgeries and people being off work that really drive that factor. When I met with our representative, this has just been the highest, what they call experience modification rate for the city. And this has been kind of across the board in industries. They're noticing higher rates. So not only did we have the claims, but then with the increase in payroll, we usually anticipate that, but we did not anticipate quite that high of an experience mod. So we're looking forward to that going down over the next year or two. We're working with some safety representatives from work comp. We'll be working with the individual departments to try and at least mitigate some items. But at the end of the day, we know that if someone gets injured, they have to be taken care of.
Thank you. Um, anything else on the financial report, council, you want to discuss with Lisa? Okay. How about the monthly staff reports? Okay, Councilmember Page, I'll turn F5 to you.
Thank you. Council members, reviewing the notice of decisions today, that's on page 46 and 47. And there were three. Did anybody need something pulled off of that for fear of harm to the city?
No. Okay, thank you. We'll move down to item G1. This has been noticed up as a public hearing. On resolution 1202-25. We've had a request from the applicant to continue this to a date certain. We're not sure if it will be ripe for hearing in 2 weeks, but I'm asking you to continue it for 2 weeks, and then if it's ready, great. If it's not, we'll move it down the line a little further. The applicant has indicated to me that there's not a specific time crunch on this one. Is that accurate, Hannah? Okay. Okay. So the request is to continue this item. And by continuing it, Jenna, we don't have to renotice it. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, it's a pleasure to council.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we continue that number. CPA FY, no, excuse me. EAS FY 2025-0003 to a date certain, and I have that as being March 10th. Is that correct?
Second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Okay, G2 is a public hearing on what we're calling the buffers code text amendment. And wait, Jenna, do you want to kick us off on this?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. My apologies for banging the microphone. Tonight, the file number that this ordinance is under is CPA fiscal year 2024 number 4. There have been a number of work sessions, both with the Planning and Zoning Commission and 4 with the City Council here, with quite a bit of community involvement via both directly and through community coalescing and providing comments through Miss Wendy Carver Herbert, who's been a spokesperson. And so there's been a lot of refinement to this ordinance as it's gone through the process, and hopefully it's made the ordinance more sound as it's gone through. Just as a quick overview of what the ordinance does in broad strokes, is that it aligns the current zoning districts with the comprehensive plan land use designations. It clarifies setbacks and exceptions to those setbacks. It provides a transition zone adjacent to residential zoning districts, particularly the R2 zoning district, as well as the proposed RM zoning district. It defines activity nodes. Currently, code points to the comp plan to define the activity nodes. It brings those definitions into code. It addresses design standards intended to create the buffer, and thus the term that we've been calling the buffer ordinance. Particularly, it addresses standards intended to provide visual privacy for existing residential uses, including looking at lighting, perimeter, landscaping standards, design elements such as placement of architectural elements or living spaces. And it also addresses how uses address the green belt. Housing adjacent to the C1 zoning district, that often adjacent or always adjacent in Garden City to arterials, notes that there should be provisions regarding safety should housing be proposed there. It also, back to the setbacks, proposes a 0 lot setback allowance. There is the inclusion of the work that was done years ago for the Boise, at that time called the Boise River Overlay, where there was a committee of people who convened together to address essentially buffering the Greenbelt and the river as well. There are a couple of matters as we worked through and refined what would be brought here tonight for the public hearing that still I want to point out specifically. It's in the staff report as well. It was decided that tonight for hearing purposes that a potential new zone called RM, a residential zone that is somewhere between the existing R3 zoning district and the R2 zoning district would have a height limitation of 45 feet. And there, in the transition zone, it noted in the last code that was reviewed by City Council that the height limitation would be 35 feet rather than that 45 feet height limitation. Staff has penciled that in to be 45 feet and made a change to 45 feet, even though that transition area is adjacent to R2 as well as the RM zoning district. Another thing to note is that there is more than one zoning ordinance proposal that's going on drafted right now. There's one that has not had as much work with the City Council as of yet that we're referring to as the planned unit development zoning ordinance. And that has provisions regarding 8.4B3 and 8.4B4. As of now, the draft version or the draft ordinance in front of you tonight has those standards remain. However, the plan unit development ordinance is also looking at those provisions of code, and staff has suggested that as these two ordinances go through, perhaps in that PUD ordinance may be tweaked as it goes through a similar process as this ordinance, getting to the same point, that those be removed out of this ordinance and just dealt with in the plan unit development ordinance. One last matter is that 8.4C3.4 states for design elements that front a public street, and staff in looking at code one last time has kind of got stuck on that word because that has a very specific meaning for setbacks or fronting, that perhaps that word should be changed to face. And with that, I want to thank the council for all of the council's effort, as well as the public. Thank the public for all of the public's efforts as well on this matter. And I stand for questions.
So just the density for the RM zone will be
15 units per acre,
Okay.
Mayor. Thank you. I did
Yeah.
fail to mention that.
Yeah.
And I know that we've mentioned this previously, but it should go, I would like to mention again, in that we have a full house tonight, that the creation of that RM zone is a creation of zoning designation. It will not automatically rezone anyone's property. That would be a separate rezoning effort to apply that zoning district to any specific property.
It was
Thank
just
you.
just adding a tool for the council to consider and the public to have it available. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, any questions of staff? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I give a brief legal summary?
Sure.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I have a legal memorandum. It starts on page 86 of your packet. There's just a couple of things I want to point out on that. Also in your packet, so the proposed resolution or the proposed ordinance is on page 127 of your packet. Ms. Thornborough's staff report is on page 98 of your packet, and then the proposed findings of fact, conclusions of law, and decision are on page 106 of your packet. There's some public testimony written in your packet as well, and then I also included a couple transcripts for your review, and the transcripts are on page 170 and 196 of your packets. Those transcripts are of the two previous work sessions on this matter to hopefully, if need be, refresh your memory on what those two work sessions. Turning to my legal memorandum, one of the things I point out is that this buffer, the buffer regulations, that is not zone specific. That is the general. So I wanted to point that out. The actual conditions for a rezone, this is not a rezone, but we're looking at the rezone criteria. So the criteria are on page 89 of my legal memorandum. And then I just had some general questions for the council. I had 9 questions for the council in my legal memorandum, and those are on page 91 of your packet. So that's my legal review. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of our city attorney? Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing on CPA FY 2024-4. I have sign up sheets by 3. Wendy, how many people are you representing tonight? Okay. Okay, normally with a room full of people like this, we would restrict the testimony to 3 minutes. However, if a number of you would like Wendy to speak on your behalf, will you raise your hand or something so I can see how many of you there are? Okay.
I just wasn't organized.
I go to bed at 10:30. In deference to that, Wendy, I'd like to invite you up, and if we can keep it to 15 or 20 minutes, that'd be great.
The good news, Mayor, is I don't think I need all of that time. As a matter of fact, today I took a face plant. And so I have bruised my chin, my nose, my head. It's left me with a blazing headache and didn't leave me with much time for really preparing for today. And so I apologize if some of my comments may seem a little bit more jumbled than usual. But for the record, I'm Wendy Carver Herbert, and I live at 8515 West Atwater Drive. I've kind of been the voice and the cheerleader for many of my neighbors, many of them that live very close to me, and some of them in a little bit extended neighborhoods. I want to thank council, thank Mayor Evans and council, and particularly staff, Jenna, and Mr. Bottoms, for all the hard work and really being open to listening to what our concerns are. I think as I stand here tonight, probably the biggest challenge that I see is I feel like we're still standing so far from the goal line in terms of where we really want to be and in terms of what it can really do in terms of impacting the type of development that we'd really like to be able to see in our neighborhood. But I recognize that this is really an important step that we take in creating the new zoning district that identifies medium density that resides within medium and low density neighborhoods, such as our neighborhood south of the river and west of Glenwood, and recognizes the challenges that we face. And there's been a lot of time and effort that's been gone into this process. And as I said, I look at it that it's really only one step of several more ahead of us.
I'd like to be able to say that just right off the bat that I'm in support of this application tonight. I do have a couple of questions, or I guess still some concerns that I see within the application. So I'd like to be able to talk about those at this point. First of all, I think just for those in the room and that we're all clear in terms of the 15 units an acre, I think is a good compromise. I think what we were really trying to accomplish is that the zoning for our neighborhoods was at 10 units an acre prior to 2015, and the height restriction was 45 feet. And I know a lot happens. I know in development and in urban development that trends change and ideas change over time in terms of what is maybe a little bit more acceptable when it comes to living units that oftentimes might have to share a neighborhood. And I think that we were all very, very clear that 35 units an acre was not a clear vision and was definitely not in accordance with the comprehensive plan that was developed in 2006. It was updated in 2019, and it was also updated, I believe, last year. And never in any of that did the definition for low and medium density ever change. And so I think the importance of trying to bring our zoning into accordance with the comprehensive plan is an absolute critical step that we're taking tonight by creating this new zoning district. And I think that the 15 units an acre is a good compromise when you consider that low density R2 zone property is 6 units an acre. R3, which was is the next step up, was at one point 10 units. It's now 35. I think as you as city leaders and development staff are really trying to grapple with, well, really what seems to be a reasonable medium density, I think that the 15 units an acre seems to be a reasonable compromise, because as we know, sometimes we have to make compromises. And I know that some of my neighbors don't necessarily agree with me. They would rather see that return to the 10 units that it was. But again, looking at the fact that trends do change, and that there needs to be maybe a little bit more of an even gap between the 6 units an acre and 35, 15 seems to be reasonable. I think that we would rather see the 35 feet as our preferred height restriction, and particularly for those developments that are adjacent to single family neighborhoods. And so I know that's something that Ms. Thornborough had brought up in her staff report tonight. I think it would be our preference to be able to see it at the 35 feet, but also I say as a reasonable person, as I know what R3 zoning was prior to the change, 45 feet was always what medium density was. And so maybe we can find that in our heads and hearts to find that as a reasonable compromise. But if we think there's any more room in your thought processes in this to take it to 35, I think we're all on board with that, right? Okay. So the only other question that a couple questions I guess I had is the one reference in the RM zoning talks about the activity node. It says activity node where the maximum density is 25 units an acre, but there's also a minimum density requirement of 14. Well, I think 14 seems reasonable, although minimum means that it has to at least be 14. When I took a look at a Google map and tried to do, because we're talking about an activity node at Garrett and Chinden, and one at Glenwood and Marigold, and tried to take that measurement of 1/4 of a mile from that point. What I saw is that still actually treads into areas that are actually identified as low density residential on the comprehensive plan. So I see a little bit of a conflict, and I'm really still remain very, very concerned about the maximum and minimum density of the activity nodes for that. I also actually believe, I didn't see that, but I know there is a transportation node on Horseshoe Bend Road and State Street. And if you take 1/4 mile into that, that actually will take that actually into the entrance of that subdivision that I can't remember the name of it, but I think most of you are familiar with it.
Lakeland.
Yes. So I guess the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we really comfortable with the 25 units per acre in those areas that overlap what is really intended to be low density residential? And then have a requirement of a 14 unit as a minimum. So our preference would be that that would not be in there. And so I raise that as a concern. And then let's see. Okay, I've already addressed the height, I think. Okay, so I do have a question about page 10 of the ordinance
Wendy,
and trying to understand. And
me
so
try-
I know we won't,
I
but
just want to try and answer, before we move on from the activity notes.
Mhm.
I'm taking some liberty as the chair, maybe to have a little more of a discussion here. And Jenna, I might need you, if you can come up. I'm having Jenna come up because she can correct me if what I'm about to offer is incorrect. Don't sit down. Stay right up there. Yeah. The overlap question, an RM tool presumes to be active there'd have to be a rezone established from whatever existing now to RM, correct?
Mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
The property would need to be rezoned.
So the overlap area that's currently R2, and I'm thinking of Garrett and Chinden, within a quarter of a mile, we have a significant area of R2 established residences in there. So to rezone that to something else would require the rezone. Certainly, I can't think of a scenario where the city would want to go in and force that rezone on private property owners. So I think there's some, there can be a conflict, and I understand the conflict that Wendy's talking about, but I can see a conflict between the broad elements of the what would be the RM and how that impacts. The RM would have to be applied to a specific parcel or parcels. And what would the process be to do that if the underlying landowners didn't want it? So my point is, I'm not asking necessarily for an answer. I think this room would even be more full than it is tonight, but I think that's a valid point, and it's something that might have to be clarified at a future point if this RM zone was going to be used somewhere. I think certainly this city council has, from my perspective, responded to a concern that was raised through your spokesperson. If you're having a bad night, Wendy, I can't tell, but there's some concerns about the large apartment buildings going in right next to your homes. And so I wanted to raise that and just maybe deal with that right now and to think of the practical application of the city going in and rezoning property that's already established in a use. Because the context of this when we started was we've got R3 parcels that are vacant and we want to be careful about how those are redeveloped or developed when that time comes. Isn't that right? So I don't know how to navigate that, but if this goes on tonight, if we have a first reading, we got a month to kind of noodle that if we need to make some adjustments. But Wendy, I wanted to just bring that up because and the council can interrupt me or correct me if I'm wrong. I certainly don't think there's any intent to go in and an existing neighborhood and take a group of homes and say, oh, we're going to change your zoning designation.
And Mayor, and if I may, just a point of clarification, the code that exists today in 82B1 requires a minimum of 14 units per acre in the R3 zoning designation without a conditional use as well. So it's taking current code and applying it through the RM.
Right. I'm just wanting to point out to the audience, there's a practical application here. I mean, you've got people in Millstream that have been living there for 40 years and that happen to be within a quarter of a mile of the Garrett and Chinden intersection. So I'm just saying this in front of the council. There's a practical application of what would motivate the city to come in and contemplate tearing all those homes out of there and doing something else against them, you know.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
there is some property, if you enter off of Horseshoe Bend Road off of State Street, there is some property in there. And if you take a look, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe almost all that property is actually zoned R3 already.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if, you know, it's the vision that the city would be looking to potentially rezone some R3 zone property. Many of these properties actually are today still R3. So that's just one example. Also, if I took if you take a look at, again, at the Garrett example, it does reach into some properties kind of behind those apartments that are still zoned as R3, but yet they actually reside on the comprehensive plan map. They are in the low density neighborhood. I agree with you. I don't anticipate some of those properties being, if ever, redeveloped, or at least maybe not in our lifetimes. But it still does exist. There are some other properties that could potentially be prime for maybe some redevelopments and definitely some scrapes in terms of looking at what we would want, what to do with that. And so I just bring it as a concern. I understand the reasoning for having the activity nodes and the transportation nodes. I think it's wise for a city to be able to be thinking about those things. But I think it's something that we want to make sure is taken into consideration. And is that actually, are those numbers that you have really reasonable, a minimum of 20, or that you have to have at least 14 units, and is 25 still the right number?
Jen, I may have another question.
Mayor.
They're all leaving me. Okay. Okay, I just, the activity node language is contained where?
Mayor, the Garden City Comprehensive Plan identifies activity nodes.
Okay.
Currently our code looks to the comprehensive plan to identify. So it just says, look to the comprehensive plan. That's where the nodes are, and there are regulations. This document takes the same language from the comp plan essentially and says the activity nodes are here, but it codifies them in the proposal.
Okay.
Instead of just referring back to the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, I interrupted you. Let's move on.
Okay. The one other question I have is on, or I guess maybe concern, maybe it's my interpretation, is on page 10, number 7 at the top, when it talks about this. It has to do with determining front setback and side setbacks, because it did remove language as it deals with multifamily dwellings. It takes out multifamily dwellings I guess I'm just wondering what it means, because typically, I think in the past, my understanding is that a multifamily development is taken in consideration that you take the whole group of them as if they were one structure, and you'd have a front side back and a side setback and a back setback. And sometimes challenges that you have when you are putting this development, these types of developments into the middle of an already established neighborhood, that sometimes that side setback, which is only, I believe, 5 feet, can be problematic because it could put that development very, very close to the side neighbors. And so I think for me, it's just my lack of, maybe how I'm reading this, or my lack of expertise. That's it. My attempt is how do you, what I want to be able to get at, and I don't know if that it's in here in some way, is how would the city be dealing with that? I mean, could you be looking at the highest density that you could potentially have, and that would be only 5 feet from a side property line?
And Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
and I'd just like to address that. And by the way, Wendy, I'm sorry to hear about your slip. I hope you recover quickly. Seems like you're sharp as ever to me, but the way I see this is, it's this problem with private property rights. How do we tell a property owner that our code says a 5-foot setback, right? And if they're adhering to that, what strong suggestion do we have that doesn't constitute some sort of interference with their property rights? And that's what I struggle with, because we're such a tightly compacted city. We're already pretty dense, even in areas that have lower density, right? And I'm sure you can appreciate the challenge that it presents. And I guess I'd be open to suggestions.
Well, I think certainly what's being proposed with the landscape buffers, I mean, some of that can certainly help. I mean, whether we think that some of the language or some of the landscape buffers can really be done well and effectively within a 5-foot setback without actually creating trees and root systems that end up creating problems on both sides of the property line, I guess, are, part of the question that I have. And I understand it's a really, really difficult pickle to be in our situation. But it came to mind as I was reading this, and, again, I'm just raising my concerns.
There'd be a presumption. Okay, so if a detached development were to go in there, in other words, single family homes or townhomes, they could be 5 feet. Those, and I'm thinking of things that trigger design review and things that don't. So if you're conjuring up, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I mean, if you're imagining is a better word, a multi-story apartment or something like that, that triggers the design review function of the city. So that doesn't guarantee necessarily anything, but our design review process has a critical eye on things that might be impacted by both the buffering and the compatibility components that they look like and that they evaluate in our code. So, you can't figure out every scenario, but again, if you're imagining the worst case scenario from your perspective, that likely would have to go through a design review process. And we've had good success mitigating a lot of things through our design review function here. So that's just for what it's worth comment.
Thank you. Then one other point on page 8 on item number 2, when it talks about the maximum height, but then there's the ability to be able to do an additional 20 feet as measured from the roof line to be able to accommodate spire, steeple, belfry, chimney, parapet, need to conceal mechanical equipment and roof access structures. And this is a question. So my concern is, I mean, I realize this stuff would go through a design review, and I would hope that our design review, would provide valuable feedback. But if we have a straight roof might be proposed, which I would hope that it wouldn't be in our neighborhood, because I would really like to be able to see pitched roofs and things like that that are more complementary to everything around it. But if you have a straight roof and maybe a 20-foot parapet at the top, I mean, does that really aesthetically fall within the neighborhood? And my question is more like, is that somewhere either in the existing code or somewhere here that I didn't see that can address that, so that the design of that really fits within the roof line in a very complementary way. So that's really my question and my concern about that. 20 feet's a pretty significant amount. Okay, so that kind of leaves it with, I think, what I saw, as I said, in as a whole, support this application. And again, I'm very, very appreciative. I think that it's been stated a couple times, but I think for the benefit of our neighbors here, that this is really just the first step. This creates a zoning district that gives the city a tool to begin the process of rezoning properties at a future time. My hope and desire and strong encouragement is that the city begin moving forward as quickly as possible to actually begin addressing the actual rezoning of properties. I know that's going to take a bit of time, but I would hope that as soon as this application is finalized and adopted, that the city would see to the opportunity to be able to move to that next phase quickly.
Okay, thank you. You lost me on the 20-foot in addition to the 45.
Page 8.
Yeah, I don't.
And Mr. Mayor, that's going to be page 134.
134, thank you. Okay. Okay. Oh, 130, you said 134.
That's going to be F1 and F2.
Okay, okay, sorry. Okay, when I read that, that might need a little wordsmithing, but I don't read that as that would apply to someone who's residence or a residential use that is talking about, if you had a fire hose tower, a power line tower, am I on the right one?
Item 1 above is what I
Oh, I thought you
interpreted
said,
it
I thought you
focused.
said F2. Okay.
And the concern is the spire or steeple, belfry, cupola,
Oh,
or
I
chimney
see.
pyramid. But I think that the key words there is needed to conceal mechanical equipment and roof access structures. So again, I think you were heading down.
Okay.
That's a commercial. I don't typically hear or see residential that has a need for roof access structures.
Well, we can visit about that. Just want to, 5 feet, I think you can hide an air conditioning unit, but anyway, we'll look at that. Okay.
All right, thank you.
I mean, because I see that. I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong one. Okay.
Okay, so that's really all that I have. Again, thank you very much for moving this along. I've been working, this has been top of my mind since 2019. And so it's taken a while to get to this point, but once we started, as neighbors started participating in the public process with the neighborhood meetings that began last summer and through each step going to planning and zoning and through the work sessions, I'm really pleased with the progress that we've made. But put the pedal to the metal.
So just before you leave, just so I don't misunderstand, you prefer 35 feet, but understand 45 feet. The activity node and how that overlap with minimum densities could impact existing uses that are more R2 in nature. The 5-foot side setback, contemplating up to a 45-foot structure within 5 feet of property line, and adding non-habitable 20-foot, potential 20-foot structure above the roof line, which wouldn't be the peak of the roof, but it would be the at the top of the framing wall. Would be the way I'd interpret that. But at any rate, we'll look at those things. That said, if the council decides to go ahead and do the first reading, that takes a 3-reading process. That's what we're anticipating here. So there'd be a little time to wordsmith some of that. Would you prefer that to go on, or do you want to delay this? That's a tough question.
It's a tough question because I mean,
I
as I
can't
ended my remarks, I just would
I
like
can't
move forward,
promise
but I
that-
also want to be able to have things right.
Yeah.
So I think if it can be addressed within the reading process, I guess the challenge that we have oftentimes in the public is sometimes we don't get a chance to see the revisions until kind of late.
Mhm. Well, I just am trying to, so the council has some parameters decided. I can't promise that anything will get changed.
Sure.
Because like you said, it took a long time to get to the point we're at now. I just, I will just tell all of you, it's hard to address every possible scenario that could come up in a theoretical fashion in a zone. I know even the R2. I mean, so, but there seems to be some urgency to get this RM tool in place so that we can go to a next step, if I understood your testimony right earlier. So if you have an opinion on beginning the process through the 3 readings or not, this would be the time to express it to the council.
I think my preference would be, I would like for it to move forward. I think the biggest one, I think probably the most significant one for us would be the height, is if there's a decision and discussion tonight about the height, whether that's something that the council has, is open to and addressing that and taking it to 35 feet. I think some of these other questions are issues. I mean, when I think about setbacks, I think the setbacks have been what they have been for a very long time. And I just bring it up as a concern. And I think with the parapet, again, it's very possible Ms. Thornborough could potentially address this, that, my whole point about it is if that's what's going to be, I want to be ensured that the design review has the tools to be able to say that needs to really be designed well within the overall design and roof line of that project, so that it doesn't look as if it's, I mean, if it's a steeple or, that sort of thing, that's different because you're talking about a church, but I'm most, thinking about the mechanical. And there are residential developments that are being built today with the mechanical on the roofs. Most of them I think are being hidden very nicely. I would say that's what happened with the development on Strawberry Glen. But it was just a question that came up, and as I said, 20 feet's a lot.
There's a lot. Okay, and again, that's just information. I just wanted the council to have an opportunity of to hear what you thought about that. I got a couple, thank you. Is there anything further?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Carol Layton, who is opposed to the application, but you didn't check whether you want to testify or not. Is Carol here? Yes. Would you like to testify? Okay, that's perfectly good. We'd love to hear from you, but I need to have you come up here so we can hear from you. This is America. You get to have whatever opinion you want.
I'm not used to doing this.
Well, and you're doing fine.
Okay.
We're just folks.
Oh,
So
right.
if you would, Carol, give us your name and address.
Okay, it's Carol Layton and it's 8531 West Clubhouse Lane in Garden City.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and all I wanted to do was talk a little bit about what I saw last time at our meeting. And to me, my first,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry,
Oh.
my first impulse was, this looks like some kind of urban, development, like a tenement almost. And what that would look like sitting in the middle of our neighborhood, as it is,
Mhm.
I just thought, how in the world can we do something like this? It would,
Mr.
Just-
Mayor, is
Yes.
this a document that the city's published?
this is what we got a couple weeks ago at Willowbrook when the consultants were there.
This is the Boise Bible College thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Am I in the
Okay.
wrong
No,
place?
You're in the right place. We just maybe have the topic a little bit confused.
I've just never
Okay.
seen that before.
Oh,
Yeah,
Miss Layton.
yeah.
That's why I was.
What we're talking about tonight for is would allow the city to have a zoning designation that would not allow what you're holding up.
Yeah.
Okay, and if that zone that the council's contemplating creating, if that tool's created and a property is rezoned to that RM, as we're gonna call it, if it goes through the system, it wouldn't allow that because that wouldn't qualify. That would be too much. Okay. What you're holding up is a piece of property that we don't have an application on yet, but that's a whole different
Okay.
circumstance than what we're talking.
All right, so
Okay.
maybe I'm not quite where I should be right
No,
now.
you're fine. I think you're just fine. It's great to hear from you.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
you
Yeah,
bet.
and it just seemed like, I saw some apartments like this at the corner of Orchard and Franklin,
Mhm.
new, and I thought, okay, now they work there because they have, Orchard Street, very
Sure.
busy, Franklin, very
Sure.
busy, but not where we are.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
I appreciate your.
That will
time.
likely come up later, that
Okay.
particular thing, so, but, oh. Yeah, yeah. I'm already starting to perspire. Okay. Okay, let's see, Jeannie Jackson Heim, didn't wish to testify, but, she supports it. Where's Jeannie? Oh, hi, Jeannie. Okay. And I had another one, I thought somewhere. Did I get everybody? Oh, Bob Sorvug, is that, or? And Bob, correct my pronunciation of your name, I'm sure.
Difficult to pronounce.
If you would, sir, give us your name and address for the record.
Name's Bob Sorvog. I live at 8841 West Duck Lake Drive,
Okay,
almost 20-year resident. And I was also on your comprehensive plan update committee a couple of years back.
okay,
I'm really glad to see the city council considering this new zoning tool for the city. I think it's an excellent thing. A couple of things I want to point out. I really appreciate that we have caring citizens here. Wendy Carver really exemplifies that by all of her energy bringing this forward and getting people kind of educated and inspired, and that this council is so responsive to that. Also really appreciate Jenna's efforts on processing planning issues. I used to be in her shoes. I was a planning director for most of the 33 years in my planning career, and I was able to survive that and happily retired here now.
Jenna may need some counseling, so she'll
But
keep your number.
I also wanted to really, just this afternoon, I tried to catch up on this, but your attorney, Charles Wadhams, put together a treatise here on takings. And I just wanted to compliment him. This was one of the best in my career. I don't know if I ever saw a better summary of the issue of takings in relationship to cases that I had to deal with our legal counsel before, but could be a bestseller. I really,
Oh, boy, we can't live with Charlie now.
I truly appreciate this. People, I saw, you see in the Nolan decision, other things that I was reminded of in my career that we need to pay attention to. Really good stuff. One of the things I wanted to point out here, this discussion on the 35 to 45. I also prefer the 35. I can understand that 45 feet would be perhaps reasonable in some locations, but I would say that if you have applications in this new RM zone that I hope you adopt, it's really very well done. I would hope that it be at 35, but to extend up to 45, that would be pursuant to a recommendation by the design review committee, and then maybe a final decision by your planning and zoning committee. So basically the standard would be 35. You would have to have good reason to go to 45, because again, it's medium density, not high density. But I think that would be a good tool. Another thing I wanted to catch on is, again, I think your comprehensive plan is excellent. In my career, we were admonished to immediately after adopting a comprehensive plan, or in this other state I lived in, we did this, we called it the general plan, but it was actually was legally required to have your zoning in compliance with the general plan, or in this case, comparable would be the comprehensive plan. I would really encourage this council to direct staff to begin the process of rezoning all of the Garden City to become in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Really, the definition of planning is resolution of issues, and your life will be much easier going forward if you can match the zoning regulations with the policies that you have stated that you intend to do contained in the comprehensive plan. I know the laws in Idaho are a little bit different, but I think your attorney has also explained very well, this connection. And I know Jenna well understands that too, but I would really encourage that the city council really get serious about that, so these kind of issues don't come up and it creates more dissension and confusion. Another thing I would advise, and this is probably not going to be popular, but having neighborhood meetings between the affected residents that learn about the meeting and the developer without city staff there to conduct the meeting creates a lot of confusion. So there's kind of an intimidation relationship between residents or affected people and the proponents. I think it's really important to have some staff resources there to understand, here's the process where it starts from A to B. I don't know, maybe your council can explain that to you, but I have not seen it where Idaho law requires a neighborhood meeting, but by practice, it's really important for everybody to get on the same page in the beginning and understand that the process and the law that the city has to administer is there to protect the residents and the developer in a secure, understood process that's gonna go forward. I think that's all I have, but again, I really commend this city council, you, Mr. Mayor, Jenna, and your city attorney, Charles, for being well prepared. And I think this is a great tool to move forward with this RM zone.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any
Thank you.
questions? Thank you very much. Okay, that's everybody I had signed up for, or had signed up. Did I miss anybody? Okay. With that, council, are we ready to close the public hearing? I think so.
Mayor,
Oh,
if I may, just to address a couple of items.
Okay.
I wanted to note that regarding the side setbacks on page 10, that the side setbacks would not negate the overall height requirement within the zoning districts or the transition buffer requirements. And then one solution that I thought of, listening to the testimony regarding on page 8, the 20-foot allowance that is currently in code allowing for spires, steeples, et cetera, chimneys, is to break that into 2 provisions instead of 1 and have the parapet just state that it can be large enough to conceal the mechanical equipment. And I believe the council will remember this, but for the benefit of those that are in the audience or online tonight, the discussions, this council had a quite in-depth work session looking at densities and heights and what that might look like. And 45 feet, certainly within areas of Garden City, there might be single-family houses with large vaulted ceilings that would exceed the 35 feet. And that is ultimately where that got drafted or was drafted in at 45 feet. But that is the reasoning there. The 15 unit limitation would still apply. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
yes.
Thank you, Director Thornborough. How, just imagining and thinking out loud, is there a way to smith something where 45 feet would be the top, right? So if you have to have a parapet, you have an elevator shaft, then you're building your structure lower so that the highest point of that building is 45 feet. Is there language that would allow for that?
Mayor, Council President Page, certainly we can look at having that max, including all allowances, including chimneys, spires, et cetera, be at 45 feet.
Something to consider.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jenna while we got her up here? Okay, great. With that, let's close the public hearing on CPA FY 2024-4. Council, the decision is to whether or not to have the first reading. Or if you would prefer to do something different than that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, Mr. Wadums, on page 91, as you indicated, you have a list of 9 questions. These are somewhat extensive questions. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, it would seem that you would like answers to these questions prior to adopting. Is that fair?
Mayor, Council Member Jorgensen, ideally, yes. Those were just when I reviewed the packet and did my legal research, those were some questions I had generally. There were some, as Ms. Wendy Carver Herbert said, there have been some changes to this ordinance from December to now. And so my 9 questions are, is the council good with the changes that have occurred from December till now? Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so we had the first reading. Is there another? Because they brought up a lot of issues, are we certain about the 35 feet? Density, things like that. Does there need to be further discussion with the council before the first reading, or can we have that first reading and then still also have those discussions?
You can have the first reading and I would recommend maybe having some of the discussion that you have in your mind now before the first reading. I think what we want to avoid is having a wholesale change during the reading process.
Right.
So the council gets to decide what's fairly de minimis and what's not. If we're talking about clarifying the 20-foot issue, that's not a de minimis thing. I'm not sure anybody was anticipating, oh gee, we're gonna have a 65-foot tall fill in the blank right next to us. I don't think that's what was meant there. The activity node issue, that's something that might need a different approach. This is just my opinion. Because we create a conflict. The 35 to 45 feet, we do have single family residences that are more than 35 feet high in town in low density areas. So we had a suggestion on how to deal with that from Bob. None of those things seem to me to be a wholesale change, in my opinion, of this ordinance. So if you have some areas that you'd like to have addressed, then we can do that between the first and second reading. We'd like to avoid that, but the option is to have another work session, give the staff new direction. Our director is going to be out of town, so that would push this into April. So, because I wouldn't want to have this discussion without Jenna in town. She gets to take a vacation for the very seldom does she actually do that. So, that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Mayor, I think it might be beneficial for the council to have discussion now on questions 1 through 9. Which is packet page 91 for those who are following along. And if we can answer some of these questions quickly and easily, I think it'll give us a sense of where we're at in going forward with the reading process or not. If we find struggles coming to agreement or wrapping our head around some of these questions, that might inform whether we want to have a reading tonight.
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, just on the point of order on the legal side, the one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the draft decision document that's on page 106 of your packet. This is the document that the city of Boise basically got in trouble with in the interfaith case. I think this document should address all the comments that were made tonight. We didn't know what the comments were going to be necessarily, so this document does not have some of the comments. So if the council does want to move forward with the first reading tonight, my recommendation is to not adopt this until the third reading, so I can make sure it complies with the interfaith case.
Okay. Question 1, does the council want new regulations on activity nodes, neighborhood designations, and transit-oriented development nodes? As a reminder, I believe Jenna said that this would codify the language in the comp plan would be codified in this ordinance. Is that correct? Yeah.
Mayor, that is correct. Currently, 82B1 does establish the regulations regarding the activity nodes. It just refers back to the comprehensive plan rather than identifying what is identified in the comprehensive plan and code.
So there's no use you going back to your chair to work through.
Okay.
those numbers. So, so number one, any comments on, is that something you want to take a look at or not?
So Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question of staff?
Sure.
Thank you. So Director Thornborough, just as a matter of organizing this, can you go through what the benefit would be to answering these questions or having language about each of these questions in the code versus in a more flexible document like a resolution that could be modified easier as time requires it?
Mayor, Council, President Page, this particular matter with the activity nodes being regulated by code and not being defined in code has long had staff pause, wondering if there could be a challenge where the comprehensive plan is not a regulatory document that is enforceable legally, whereas the code is. And so the code looking and enforcing something that's identified in another document is what has given staff pause and the reason for adding it to the plan or to the ordinance, excuse me.
I see. Well, does it fit here with this particular ordinance or should it be an ordinance of its own?
And Mayor, Council President Page, in that the setbacks, et cetera, were being addressed. That table was addressed in code quite a bit. And because that section of code was being looked at this point in time, it was added into the code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So would an option be to take that language out? I'm just asking.
Mayor, you could take it out. You would leave the code referring to the comprehensive plan to enforce regulations. For example, several of the codes currently require at least 14 units per acre in the activity nodes because that's kind of generally the bare minimum that a transit stop would be viable. There would be the ability you could take it out, but the issue would remain and that staff is concerned about.
Okay.
Bill, what do you think about number one?
Oh, let's see. I think it's fine. I'd like to see things kind of made simple, but it sounds like this really has to be part of this based on what I'm hearing Jenna say. Ideally, I'd like to take it in pieces and make sure we get them all really right. But I think based on what you said about how it relays back to minimums and things like that, but I think it probably needs to stand as it.
Council President, I actually agree with and believe we should codify portions of the comp plan. I think it will help alleviate some conflict and confusion. And my opinion is if, 14 is the minimum, then that's part and parcel of adopting it or codifying the language, so.
Yes, Council President, I agree. I think number one, and maybe all of them or most of them are helping our code get aligned with some of the vision in the comprehensive plan. So I'm supportive of it as well.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it seems like we have an answer to number one.
Okay. Number two, does the council want new regulations on encroachments into the maximum height?
You define that.
Mayor, or what I believe that Mr. Wadums is asking about perhaps is that allowance for parapets to conceal mechanical equipment. And that's something that has come up through design review in the past where concealing the equipment, sometimes those parapets aren't high enough and then you just see the mechanical equipment. I believe that's Mr. Wadums' intent of asking that question.
What's, I guess, what's the difference between that and number 7 then?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, I think what Mr. Wadums is asking there is that there's that transition area. So when a development is adjacent to the R2 zone or the RM zone, there would be a maximum height limitation
Got it, thank you.
of 45 feet to be specific, as currently drafted.
So number 2 would be, we'd want to revise that language that we've already talked about, not to be an antenna or what, you know, the covered, whatever mechanical it would be.
It can be everything that's, everything attached to the structure is a maximum of 45 feet.
Right. Address.
Mr. Mayor, for clarity, from the roof line,
From the ground level,
from the ground level.
45 feet from the
Right,
ground
okay.
level. So, you know, if there was an aberration of some kind because of a chimney or something, I guess somebody could ask for a variance or a waiver or something, but
Mr. Mayor, just point of order, my question on number 2 was really referencing, and I think everybody's correct, but on page 134 of your packet, it talks about encroachments into the maximum height by up to 15 feet are allowed, 10% or less of the roof space if utilized as an amenity is required by 2C 15B, such as rooftop patio. So that was an addition from December till now. I just wanted to make sure that the council made a conscious decision.
thanks for that clarification.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, to be honest, but I'm just saying.
Well, you get to party on the roof, it sounds like.
I like rooftop parties.
Huh? I'm not sure this. I don't get to make the decision here, but I'm not sure that in our RM that we need rooftop patios when you're in an area. I think part of the issue is privacy with you know, for the adjoining neighborhood. So, but that's the question. So if it's 45 feet,
Well, I think you look at the water district, there's all those little townhomes down there that are adjacent to, and they've got a lot of them have rooftop patios.
they do. That's one reason we're not doing R3, because R3 you can do that.
Right, so I mean, so I think we probably need to define it as from the ground level, it's 45 feet regardless of what you have, which is, I think, what the mayor suggested, that language is probably more palatable.
So I'm trying, and I'm horrible with distance and height, so.
Okay.
I have a deck off of my second story.
Mhm.
Would this be considered a height of up to 15% or 15 feet?
Well, your house isn't 45 feet tall.
Okay.
We've got areas of town where you've got a 2-story, you've got vaulted rooms and you have a 12 pitch roof or a 6, you know, and that can easily exceed 35 feet. So I think that was the genesis of the 45 foot, not.
The average 2-story home is about 30 to 35 feet. 3 stories is 45 feet, but you do have some exceptions. There's probably not very many 2-story houses in Garden City either. 45 feet is
No,
a
but-
ways up. I
Yeah.
don't think people realize that.
I would say this, the spirit of this ordinance or this zoning district would be privacy, right? So it's for existing homeowners that have, new neighbors move in, you know, to have their, privacy. And so if you think about a window that somebody could see out of, the roof is well above that. Right? So if the roof is 45 feet, you know, those aren't eyeballs at 45 feet. Those are eyeballs at whatever it is. I don't know.
Right, but I think
36
for
feet.
number 2, it's like we don't want to add on top of that, right?
Right.
So I think we're all in agreement, if we have 45 feet, it's 45 feet, we're not. So the number 2, as long as the definition is the maximum height is 45 feet.
And that's what I would be more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So if you need an elevator shaft, you're building a smaller structure.
Right.
Okay, we good with that one? Okay, number 3, does the council want new regulations on fences and retaining walls?
I haven't flipped to that, Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, members of the council. I haven't flipped to that section, but for example, one situation that has come up more recently is people will build retaining walls and then fences on top. Other jurisdictions will have step backs so that you don't end up with a 12-foot fence adjacent to you. You would end up with maybe a 6-foot retaining wall and then step back slightly, you'd have the fence. So somebody could have their dog or whatever that may be. That is one example, and I will flip quickly to the fence regulations to discuss others. But currently, our current code lumps fences and retaining or walls. It just says fences and walls, and that does end up with a lot of confusion as people bring proposals through, and clarifying retaining walls is what's intended, and how that those two structures can interact with each other is the intent of that section of code.
Listen, Mayor. So one question is, does retaining walls, fences, landscaping, trees, all that, buffers, all need to be part of? Should that be its own? Should we address that separately? Because we're talking trees and fences and diagrams, or does that need to be part of this too? Because it seems like I mean, how much scope creep do we want? Or is that something we should separate?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, staff took a kind of a broad view at what is a buffer. Is landscaping a buffer? Is fencing a buffer? Is architectural design a buffer? Certainly, if you don't feel that they're appropriate in this ordinance, they could be, sections could be pulled back out.
Well, if retaining walls and fences and roof lines provide for privacy of the pre-existing neighbor, I think that's pretty important.
I just think if we have time by the 3rd reading to make sure we're square with it. Great.
Retaining walls contemplate you're retaining something. That's retaining wall shouldn't be a fence. It might be a fence on one side if it's low. It's a way to deal with it with a quick change of topography.
And Mayor, members of the council, if I may add, these are general requirements that we're discussing right now. They're not specific to the proposed RM. And what we're seeing with the floodplain redevelopment and potential floodplain is that we are seeing a lot of development going up. And so we do have just kind of a stair step effect with adjacent neighbors.
So are we good with leaving that the way it is, that historically has been in our code as we refer to fences?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll just offer up, I think 3, 4, and 5, or mostly 3 and 4, I guess, are quite similar in their, in what they're asking of us, what those questions are asking of us, and I think to Director Thornborough's point, that to me, they address ways in which we can buffer. So I think they are appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish, in my opinion.
Anybody disagree with that statement?
No.
No.
Okay, let's go to number 5. Does the council want new regulations for the Boise River Natural Resource? I'm not sure I'm beamed up on what we mean there.
Mayor, if I may opine for Mr. Wadhams, I believe he can certainly jump in. But when the Boise River overlay was reviewed by at least 2 people in this room on the committee and brought through to this point, the intent is really on how to not buffer adjacent residents, but how to buffer and interact with the green belt and not nature path, and what development adjacent to the green belt should look like. For the most part, that is landscaping, directed at landscaping and setbacks in this proposal. But again, kind of that broad strokes, what does buffering mean? Does it just mean protecting residential areas, or does it mean other areas that may need to be buffered as well?
And the way you have it, you're happy with?
Mayor, if I'm happy with the ordinance, yes, I hope that it's well done. I know the committee that worked on that spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I appreciate, and I'm sure everybody appreciates their effort that they spent on that.
Okay.
And actually, I know that at least more than one was present tonight.
Anybody want to change number 5? Okay, number 6, let's see, did we already deal with that one now, with the 45 feet? Let's see, does the city council want the code to indicate that the maximum height of a structure adjacent to an R2 and RM zoning district shall not be greater than 45 feet for structures that are adjacent to the zoning district, regardless of the zoning district, unless certain conditions are met? So,
Yeah, and I guess my question would be, what are the last 5 words referring to?
And Mayor and members of the council, I can add to that, those certain conditions are right in the draft.
Okay.
So
Okay.
rather than type them all up.
Fair
Fair
enough.
There are certain conditions.
Fair enough.
okay, but those are in the ordinance, proposed ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah. Does anybody want to change those?
I just had a question, Mr. Mayor. So, Bob, sorry, I can't pronounce your last name. Mentioned, the goal of 35 feet and then up to 45 feet with approval of staff or some type of language like that. Is that something we want to look at or just stick with the 45 feet?
I think the presumption that if it's up to 45 feet, that everything's going to be 45 feet with the other components added in this RM zone. It seems to me that we're trying to accomplish not restricting something to 35 feet when we know we've got examples that of single family residences that will exceed that. So you can leave it as it's written and noodle it for 2 weeks and research or whatever anybody wants to do if you want to do it that way.
And another question, so is this, again, this is related to buffers, not necessarily our
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, that is correct. I know that we've spoken a lot about RM tonight, as I think that that is the public's biggest interest. However, there are a lot of provisions in this proposal that relate to, that are citywide in design standards.
Because there's a difference between buffers and 45 feet, like versus 14 houses on an acre and 45 feet, which would be RM specifically. So I was just curious, it was brought up, so I didn't know if that was something we wanted to contemplate, but again, we have 3 readings and we can figure that out. Mr. Buck.
Mayor, if I may clarify though, however, the transition zone, to be clear, would be adjacent to R2 or RM. And so that's where the height, additional height restrictions would come in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. I think that clarifies a lot of that.
Yeah.
So can I move to number 8? Everybody? Okay. Does the city council want the code to indicate that perimeter landscaping buffers shall provide the following benefits, in quotes, to provide a visual barrier between different land uses, to provide privacy, and to protect from wind, dust, noise, traffic, glare, visual disorder, and harmful or noxious impacts? That's a standard that physically can't be achieved.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that there's the problem with that is the word shall. And then that these are all these conditions that it must protect from or shall protect from. I think that's a bar too high.
I think the intent is to mitigate the impacts.
Yes.
To some
Maybe that's better words.
some standard, you know,
Otherwise, nothing will ever get built.
don't clap. So anyway, so how do we deal with that one?
Mayor, in looking at the wording, the purpose statement does use that word shall. It could state the perimeter landscaping buffer is intended to provide the following benefits. And to list the benefits, is it in that it's the purpose statement?
Okay, why don't we, with the council's permission, why don't we look at that language before we come back? If you go to the first reading, then second reading, we'll look at that language.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Number 9,
Did we address 7?
yeah, I think we did. I think number 7 was
35.
nothing's gonna be more than 45 feet high.
Do you want to readdress that?
Did we cover the step back 10 feet for every 20 feet?
Jenna was just talking about that a minute ago.
I thought she was referring
The
to
buffering.
item 6.
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, in the transition to maybe address both, in the transition areas, there's a requirement, a maximum height limit adjacent. And then there's different ways for, say, you're in the C2 zoning district or another zoning district with different height allowances. And one way is to step back 10 feet, your building, step it back. And so that massing isn't adjacent to the adjacent residential area. And so I think that specifically addresses, my phone keeps turning off. I think it's number
A mini
7.
version of the boardwalk. So as you go up, you
Uh,
gotta go back.
Mayor, that's correct. And there's a diagram that's in code that shows 35 and then a 10-foot step back. And then that's how you would address starting to give that
That's on
buffering.
page 135.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Does the council agree with the new definitions?
And Mr. Mayor, can I just add, on that, I just haven't had a chance to get with Jenna to figure out where these definitions came from. The only one that I had a question about is the definition of green belt. I didn't know, by changing the definition of green belt, there could be some collateral issues regarding regulation on the green belt that we're having with the memorandum of understanding with other agents. So that was a concern.
Can we look at that between now and the next time, council? That okay? Everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I feel like we're ready for a first reading. We want to take a vote on that. That's those questions that be in the heavy lift.
Point of clarification or order, I guess, Mayor. Staff would request if you move forward to the first reading, if you could approve the code and close the public hearing prior to the, I guess maybe not close, and if you want to leave it open for the changes, you could leave open the public hearing, I guess.
It was closed.
It was closed. Okay.
It was closed
Yeah,
earlier.
we closed
Excuse
it.
me.
We
My
closed- Yeah, we
apologies.
closed this hearing, yeah, so. Council President?
Yes,
I'll
sir.
turn it to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move for a first reading by title only of CPA FY 2024-0004 buffers.
And I will second.
By title. By title only.
By title.
Please.
You do. By title only.
Yes.
And I'll second.
Well, the clerk's color was going out of her face there for a second. I've got a motion and a second to read CPA FY 2024-0004 by title only. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Ordinance 1050-24, an ordinance of the city of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, repealing Title 8 Development Code, Chapter 2 Base Zoning District Regulations, Article H Flood Hazard, Section 6 Riparian Zone, amending Title 8 Development Code, Chapter 2 Base Zoning District Regulations, Article A General Conditions. Through Article C, Section 27 Laundromat Self-Service Cleaning, amending Chapter 4 Design and Development Regulations, Article A General Provisions, through Article I Landscaping and Tree Protection Provisions, Section 8 Perimeter Landscaping Provisions, amending Chapter 7 References, Article A Definitions, Section 2 Definition of Terms, adding Title 8, Chapter 2, Article B, Section 4 Mix of Uses, adding Chapter 4, Article M Boise River Natural Resource, hereby creating a new zone-based district designation, repealing all other ordinances or parts thereof to the extent they conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we've got some more business. That's all that's going to happen on this tonight. So in 2 weeks, there'll be another opportunity for reading, and you're all welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But if you want to leave, I'll wait just a few minutes and let you go. Wendy, you got to be to work in a little while, don't you, in the morning?
Mr. Mayor, can we actually?
Yeah, we'll take a short recess. Thank you. So let's get back. Night, Dale. Good night, Wendy.
Hi,
Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Am I good to go?
We're good to go.
Okay. We are on item G4. This is resolution 1195-25. Dealing with some changes to our fee schedule. Go ahead, Jenna. You care if I call you Jenna tonight? I was instead
Mayor, not
Director
at all.
Thornborough. I was getting lazy tonight.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure.
Well, from now on, it's Director Thornborough.
Mayor, members of the council, this specific resolution is to deal with an amendment to the Safe Built contract at some level. The current existing contract indicates that annually they can charge the city up to 4% more based on the CPA or CPI, excuse me, index for the Western region. This year, it's coming through at an increase of 2.4% that they're passing to us effective in February. So now. So,
On top of 4%.
Mayor, Council President Page, no, this would be just 2.4 this year.
Our deal with them was they wouldn't raise it more than 4% in a year over year. So we adopt this resolution, or we don't have a contract for development services or building services with Safe Build. So that's kind of the bottom line.
It's a 2.4 instead of 4.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to adopt resolution 1195-25, a resolution of the Garden City Council adopting changes to the fees paid to Safe Build for services and providing an effective date.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Okay, item 5, G5, resolution 1200-25. This is approving the Highway District Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. This, I'll turn it back to Director Thornborough.
And Mayor, members of the council, thank you. This is an annual request from ACHD to approve or to provide the city's prioritization of transportation projects that are ACHD projects. This year, there were a couple of changes to the way that the scoring is set up. Previously, there's been programmed projects and unprogrammed projects. And so the city has ranked 1 through 10 on both of those. This year, it's just one list. And so effectively, it reduces the 1 through 10s that we have available. And then there are there are community projects and roads and intersection projects. Garden City doesn't qualify for a lot of the roads and intersection projects in that most of the roads are considered to be local roads in Garden City, and those arterial roadways that we do have belong to the state. This list does have a few that are designated separately. They're highlighted in blue as potential roads and intersection prioritizations. And then the others are ranked under that community projects. Also, ACHD does an outreach annually to the public. The public's comments that they received are included in your packet. Maria with the Development Services Department summarized those in a memorandum to you. 6 comments were regarding the pedestrian crossing at Chinden and 43rd Street. 3 comments were addressing State Street and the Glenwood pedestrian crossing. Also, there were comments related to safer bicycle and pedestrian access. As well as there was 1 comment in support of the 35th Street Greenbelt Brown Street project. And then other comments regarding the State Street and Pierce Park Lane project and the Curtis Hill and Poplar in Chinden Boulevard project. This year is already noted. The ranking is only a 1 through 10 on the communities, and I believe a 1 through 5 on potential. intersection and roadways projects. And the reason I say potential is that I believe that ACHD standard might be arterials. But if it extends to collectors and where arterials that may be on the state or state system intersecting with ACHD projects are included in those. The city will send those, and hopefully ACHD will be able to include those in the other ranking. The reason that it's important to rank is your highest ranking receives the most amount of points through the city. And as you go down from there, I do see that we have our ACHD representative online who is in charge, or one of two people in charge of this process. And so she can probably do a much better job at explaining things or answering questions than I can. I did want to note that the Adams and Marigold streets remain in high priority as recommended. And to back up, the Parks and Waterway acts as your transportation a recommending body. And so the Parks and Waterways Committee has seen this and made a recommendation for your approval. There's been one addition that they did ask for, and that's the neighborhood around the 52nd Street area. With the new Expo Idaho Park going in, they're concerned about what that's going to look like on traffic regarding traffic on Adams Street and their intersection area. And so there was an addition to review that to make sure that it's functioning the best that it can with an anticipated large influx of traffic. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? Yes.
So we do this process every year. We have the annual report. I just can't remember and don't recall how many projects in the last 5 years have we actually had ACHD complete that was on our list in the city?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, there are, if you look at this is not directly answering your question, but that we're on our list, I think, getting to completion. I can't think of any, but there is the design, the right of way, and the construction year that's anticipated. And so you can see that there are programmed projects, and there have been design of some projects as well, or the starting. And so there are projects that are currently in the design phase, but actual completion of Garden City requested projects, I don't believe there have been any. Not that there hasn't been projects in Garden City. There's culvert work that's been done, for example, and so that's what they call their bridges as an example. There's been maintenance work, chip sealing, I'm sure, within the last 5
So
years.
we have things that are in the design phase and supposedly are programmed to be built, but really in the last 5 years, we haven't had anything on our list that's actually been completed.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, off the top of my head, that's correct.
So this is really just an exercise. Okay, thank you. I just wasn't
Councilmember
remember.
Jacobs, they did move the pedestrian crosswalk.
at 43rd.
That is true.
Which was important.
That
Yeah,
is true.
was-
Thank you.
Come on up, Corey.
I apologize, I didn't read the packet, I don't know what's all in here, but some of the projects they have concerned me. Adams Street, there's been talk about putting bike lanes in and getting rid of the center turn lane. That absolutely cannot happen. That's where Uber drivers park, that's where FedEx parks, that's where we go by when we need help. And so the one thing I am disappointed in ACHD about, and we've talked about it when we talked about this, moving that pedestrian crosswalk and doing some other things, is they don't ask for law enforcement input and what we might need for that. And so I would ask to maybe delay this for a couple weeks so I can look at the projects and give you guys some input on it. And I just didn't know that was in the packet. I apologize. So because there have been some things that are of concern to me as a first responder.
Does this have to be done tonight?
Mayor, it does not need to be done tonight. but I think it needs to be done at the next meeting if possible.
Well, he'll look at it by then.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Director Thornborough is, just on the agenda, and I'm pretty sure it's just a typo, but we're adopting the 2025 priorities, right?
Mayor, Council, President Page, the staff has it as the 2026 to 2030. So yes, is what this would be feeding into their 5-year work plan that they have as 2026 to 2030.
Okay. Just the,
So this would be adopted.
Yes, yes. Oh, I see the resolution title would
Oh.
I presumably be the 2025.
yeah.
Yes,
I
thank
know
you.
I'm still typing 2024 on a lot. Tough to have it to.
We've got a request from the chief to carry this forward to the next meeting.
Mayor, we do have our ACHD representative that wishes to speak.
Rebecca, go ahead and chime in.
All right there. Can you guys hear me very well?
Yeah, we can hear you quite well.
Okay. I had to put my kiddos to bed, so I was using my headphones for a minute, but I did want to clarify that our new leadership direction this year with Director Head is to definitely going to be accelerating our top 3 partner requests. And that being said, this is entirely new direction that we have never taken before. So I would take special consideration to those top 3 requests on both road and intersections and community program projects.
Great, thank you.
That is great.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We've just, since Rebecca's on the call with us, I think both the commission and Director Head are being very attentive. I'll put it that way. So
Excellent.
appreciate that. Rebecca, you can pass that comment along to your commission and to the director if you would. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes,
how would you like to handle the administration of this agenda item for the chief's request to review it closely?
I just like to move this item to the next council meeting. And then as long as it doesn't create an issue with the timing of getting it approved, which Jenna said she'd like it on the next meeting.
Excellent. Mr. Mayor, I move to postpone reposition resolution 1200-25 with regard to the Ada County Highway District Integrated 5-Year Work Plan to a date certain of March 10th.
Second.
Pending chief Stan Boss comments.
Second.
Okay, great. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item, items G6, resolution 1201. Pardon me. Better give me some more water, my friend. You guys have choked me up tonight. That's good. Thanks so much. This is a public hearing item, resolution in 1201-25. This is a different item than we just dealt with Safe Built. So this is amending our fee schedule, and Jenna will take it from here.
Thank you,
Director
Mayor.
Thornborough will take it from here.
And thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. In looking at the development service fee schedule, it's been a number of years since the fee schedule's been updated. This fee schedule is looking at addressing direct costs due to inflation and the DOPL fee structure that their revised contract uh, gave to the city, I guess. And so this is just looking at those costs at this point in time with an anticipation of maybe further on this spring, looking at indirect cost analysis. But this is just to make sure that we don't go in the red anywhere. Kind of the big takeaways are our base fee right now is kind of looking at around a 52.50 as an hourly base. And this would increase the proposal that was in your packet, would increase it to $70, just looking at
Thought we were gonna do.
man hours.
Thought we were doing 80.
And as the mayor just pointed out, that in reviewing this, the request would be to actually increase that in the adoption of this resolution to 80. And then that $70 more or less where it's looked at as an base for number of hours, and the different fees would be increased to 80. So it would adjust the different fees instead of having the base fee be at $70 an hour to $80 an hour. And that I stand for questions.
When Director Thornborough and I had this discussion, first of all, this is the first change since 2011.
12, I think.
Point, you know, so, and then the DOPL has changed the way they charge, and under the system that they now have, if we don't change our schedule, we will lose money on every permit, which I didn't think anybody would want us to do.
Mr. Mayor, given that we haven't done this in 12, 13 years, and $80 is sufficient, or does that just bring us even, and then next year we'll be behind the 8 ball again because of, you know, yeah.
We think for this go around, I mean, we can easily defend what we're doing, and this might have been a little more comprehensive if your mayor had spent some more time on this with his development services director to help her a little on this and brainstorm this. But we think this will have us covered. What isn't covered, and why she alluded to maybe coming back later, we don't have an indirect cost component to this service we provide. And by that, I mean, you got to have a building, you got to have desks, chairs, we got to heat and cool the place. We've got to have a base service level there, base overhead we have to deal with. Just like we have to have a water line main, whether you use 1 gallon or 10,000 gallons. And it's a cost allocation exercise that Lisa's going to do. And I want to bring that information back. It's not going to be huge dollars, but I mean, I think we need to account for that. We've had a number of large projects that generated a lot of fees, but we want to tune this operation a little bit so that a much lower level of service we provide, not lower level of service, numerically a different level of application numbers. We can still cover our base operations. So we think this will get us for the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the request is to adopt resolution 1201-25 as amended. As soon as I have the public hearing. I will open the public hearing on resolution 1201-25. Do we have anybody wants to opine on this topic? I don't see anybody, so we will now close the public hearing on resolution 1201-25. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
move to adopt resolution 1201-25, a resolution amending the development services fee schedule.
Second.
Okay, the maker of the motion and the second, that's as amended verbally by the staff, meaning the $70 to the $80.
Correct.
Okay,
Second stands.
okay. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Great. Last item G7. I will make this quick. Since we had the interfaith ruling from our Idaho Supreme Court, it's changed my thinking a little bit on the way we process staff reports. And I've instructed the development services staff now, when they're doing their analysis, to express, and we do this sometimes in the meetings, but to express their opinion on whether the land use application is in compliance or not in compliance. And what would change is I don't really want them anymore to tell the council, well, if you want to approve it, this is your basis. And if you want to deny it, this is your basis. I want the staff to do an analysis, or paid professionals, and evaluate it on the basis of our code and give an opinion. And then the council can accept, alter, reject, or remand on the basis of that. And I think that will also help us. It just seems a little odd to me, and this came to me when we had the Supreme Court case. Reason statements was a big issue in that. And the way we've been doing it, and this is, our attorney told us to put our jurist hat on when we're looking at this. So I'm reviewing an application and a decision we made, and I see in the packet that the people you're relying on are telling you, well, you can do this, and here's how you do it. And if you want to deny it, here's how you do it. And it's like, well, does that compromise in any way the analysis? I don't know. But we've got talented staff, and they can evaluate applications on the basis of the code. And I think we ought to have the benefit of that opinion. And if there's an area, which I think would probably be fairly rare, that requires an interpretation because of a challenge with our code or an inherently subjective piece, then that would be reflected in the staff report, and the governing body would have to deal with it on that basis. But so that's just it's not a huge change. I also think it'll help on our reason statements, whether it's pro or con, because we've got those things will be articulated. And Mr. Wadhams has indicated that reason statements will likely be longer the more complicated a project is. Well, that's all conveyed through the analysis. Our staff does most of that anyway right now, in my observation. So I just wanted to let you know, you're going to notice as we go forward that we're going to get a recommendation or an acknowledgement of compliance or non-compliance on the basis of a staff review. Anything else I need to add, Jenna?
I stand for questions.
So I'll just ask, and maybe it's better to ask this when we actually hear it, but the whole topic around reasoned statements. I guess my question about all that is, and how detailed they will need to be for bigger projects and how big the record is and that kind of stuff. How do we do that in a council meeting? I mean, if we're gonna be writing paragraphs, I mean, I guess that's what you're saying is that would be.
That's not what I'm really saying. What I'm
Okay,
saying
I
is,
misunderstood. I'm sorry.
what I'm saying is that, we see a lot of this now. If the staff's doing an analysis,
Mhm.
and it can be as simple as it meets the setback requirements.
Mhm.
And that's, why did you say it meets the setback requirements? Because the drawings indicate that it meets the setback requirements. It's that simple. And the protection I see in this is that, unlike what happened, at least from the court's position with Boise, was Boise didn't follow their code. We're gonna follow our code, because our code's gonna say, these are the criteria you evaluate a project by, and this is, does the application comply with the criteria? And the staff, we want our staff to look at that and go, yes, it complies with our criteria, or no, it doesn't. And what Mr. Wadhams wants to know is why. And most of the time, that's in there. You know? It doesn't
tell us
Huh?
why it complies or why it doesn't comply.
Yeah, and so I think I think you can capture a lot of that, and, you know, I'm getting tired, so it's now Charlie. You know, we'll,
Yeah,
you know, we'll do that, because I think, and I think a lot of that will come up in the discussion and the questions, and it may get altered a little bit by testimony here. You know, but,
Mayor, can I just add on that just briefly?
oh, no,
No, okay.
no, I'm teasing, go ahead.
I know, the issue is we need to make it clear, and we have made it clear that staff recommendations are not council's predetermination, that nothing's been
Right.
predetermined. We have that disclaimer right on there, so if the council disagrees with staff, that's fine.
Right.
We had an issue come up years and years ago where somebody said that, well, because staff is making a recommendation, it's all been predetermined. And this is just an exercise, and it's all been predetermined, and no, that's not the case. But staff can make recommendations, but that's not a predetermination on council. Those are just recommendations, and we have a disclaimer saying that.
Yeah, no, it's, Collins Group gives us a recommendation. Can you serve it or not? And if he says we can't serve it, he's gonna have to tell us why. If we can serve it, then it's implied that we have the capacity to provide water and sewer, for example. So, we rely on the staff to tell us if the drainage plan works or not. If somebody appeals a decision that comes up to us. So, anyway. Well,
Mr. Mayor, I have a draft prepared. Would you like the draft motion?
yes. I didn't know, yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm confused. I'm lost. I'm like, are we doing G7 or are we doing I1?
G7.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We're doing them.
You were talking about
I was doing I1. I am so sorry. I was doing
At
I1.
the beginning meeting, you'd put it in.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I see this big note. That's why I'm not running again.
Did I miss that?
This was a test, Councilmember Jorgensen, and you passed. Okay, would you please give a motion and so I can stop babbling?
Yes. So, council, we're asking here, for the council to approve a motion, to remand, proposed ordinance 1051-24 to the Planning and Zoning Commission in a work session so that they can review this proposed ordinance, through the lens of the interfaith case. And decide if they want to do a new public hearing or change their findings in any way. And that's on legal counsel's recommendation. And in fact, I believe a couple of the commissioners requested that as well. So that's the ask. Are there any questions about that?
No.
So then I make that motion that we remand proposed ordinance 1051-24 to planning and zoning for a work session.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we'll go to item I1, which we've already done. My apologies, council. I wrote G7 down here. Anyway. So. No comments on my mental acuity. You are all very gracious. Okay, that concludes the business on our agenda tonight. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
I was like,